Uh, Things I carried. Today we're going to talk three stories: The Man I Killed, Ambush, and Good Form, and see how these stories kind of work together. Okay, now, so The Man I Killed is about a story of this man that Tim O'Brien, the soldier, killed during his time in Vietnam. And the guy, so Tim O'Brien was hiding, right? And the soldier came walking along, and Tim threw a grenade at his feet, and then he blew up and was killed. Now, after that happened, what happened is Tim starts to tell a true war story, essentially about this guy, right? Now, when we're reading this, O'Brien also uses this idea named called metafiction, right? And metafiction is the idea of writing about the process of writing. Now, as he's doing this, he's explaining what he's doing, and he gives us some keywords to let us know that this is not necessarily factual information. So it said on page 124, he lay face up in the center of the trail, a slim, dead, almost dainty young man. He had bony legs, a narrow waist, and long, shapely fingers. His chest was sunken and poorly muscled, a scholar, maybe. His wrists were the wrist of a child. Now, that word maybe clues us in that he's going to start filling in some details on his own, right? And details that he thinks make sense with this. Because otherwise, this is just a dude that he killed. He'd been born maybe in the 1946 village of Maiki near the central coastline of Quang Ngai province, where his parents farmed and where the family had lived for several centuries, and where, during the time of the French, his father and two uncles and many neighbors had joined in the struggle for independence. He was not a communist. Here is Maiki Beach, where this person is from. It looks like a lovely area. Um, and going on down the page on 125, he liked books. He wanted someday to be a teacher of mathematics. At night, lying on the mat, he could not picture himself doing the brave things his father has done, or his uncles, or the heroes of his stories, and he hoped of it in his heart that he would not be tested. He hoped the Americans would go away. Soon, he hoped. He kept hoping and hoping, always, even when he was asleep. Now, what you might start to notice as you read this is the character that he is describing has a lot in common with the guy on the Up on the Rainy River story, or a lot in common with Tim O'Brien himself, right? Now, this guy liked math, Tim O'Brien likes to write, but if you look at how he doesn't want to let family members down, and he doesn't want to let even just the heroes of folk heroes of his culture's stories down, the heroes of the stories, he does all these things that Tim O'Brien felt very similarly, right? Going on a little bit now, after he kills him, and Tim O'Brien is standing there looking, Kiowa tries to get him to talk, right? Because he can see the shock on his face and that this is a traumatic experience he went through. Um, and he tries to get Tim O'Brien to talk, but he won't, right? And on page 126, it said, "Think it over," Kiowa said. Then later he said, "Tim, it's a war. This guy wasn't Heidi. He had a weapon, right? It's a tough thing for sure, but you gotta cut out the staring." Then he said, "Maybe you better lie down for a minute. Remember the 1,000-yard stare that we looked at yesterday? Take it slow whenever the spirit takes you." Now, he goes on and throughout this whole thing, O'Brien has just been looking at the body of this person he killed. And then he continues to add these details. Even as the boy was growing up in the village of Maiki, he had often worried about this. He imagined covering his head and lying in a deep hole and closing his eyes and not moving until the war was over. He had no stomach for violence. He loved mathematics. Going down the page a little bit, um, if he could not fight little boys, he thought, how could he ever become a soldier and fight the Americans with their airplanes and helicopters and bombs? It did not seem possible. In the presence of his father and uncles, he pretended to look forward to his patriotic duty, which was also a privilege, but at night he prayed with his mother that the war might end and end soon. Beyond anything else, he was afraid of disgracing himself, and therefore his family and village. But all he could do, he thought, was wait and pray and try not to grow up too fast. "Listen to me," Kiowa said. "You feel terrible. I know that." Then he said, "Okay, maybe I don't know." Now, again, but above all else, the soldier that Tim O'Brien killed was afraid of disgracing himself and his family, which again is very similar to the guy in the Up on the Rainy River story. Going on a little bit on 128, Kiowa shook his head. There was some silence before he said, "Stop staring." Then he goes on about this guy, right? His chest was sunken and poorly muscled. A scholar, maybe. Again, that maybe implies that Tim O'Brien obviously doesn't know these things about him, but he's filling in these details in his mind. And for years, yes, maybe a scholar. And for years, despite his family's poverty, the man I killed would have been determined to continue his education in mathematics. The war, he knew, would finally take him, but for the time being, he would not let himself think about it. He'd stopped praying. Instead, now he waited. And as he waited, in his final year in university, he fell in love with a classmate, a girl of 17. One day, evening, perhaps, they exchanged gold rings. Now, all of this, none of this happened, right? But this is Tim's way of trying to make this make sense to him. And in the next chapter, we're going to see why he needs to do that, right? Then it said, Kiowa covered the body with a poncho on 1:30. Hey, you're looking better, he said. No doubt about it. All you needed was time and some mental R&R. Then he said, man, I'm sorry. Then later he said, why not talk about it? Then he said, come on, man, talk. He was a slim, dead, almost dainty young man about 20. He lay with one leg bent underneath him, jaw in his throat. His face was neither expressive nor inexpressive. One eye was shut, the other was a star-shaped hole. This is the image which is going to play through his head over and over and over. The things they carry, right? Chapter 1's all the things they carry to war, but all these people are carrying a lot home from war, right? And the things they're carrying home from war are these really difficult experiences that they have to live with for the rest of their lives. Now, that was a long time ago, right? Now, the next chapter, Ambush, starting on 131, jumps forward to present time when the book was being written. When she was 9, my daughter Kathleen asked if I'd ever killed someone. She knew about the war. She knew I'd been a soldier. You keep writing these stories, she said, so I guess you must have killed somebody. It was a difficult moment, but I did what seemed right, which was to say, of course not, and then to take her into my lap and hold her for a while. She's 9, right? And even if you want to tell your kid the truth, as soon as you tell your kid, yeah, I killed someone, Dad killed someone, in war, that's what you're supposed to do. But your kid can never look at you the same way, right? So he didn't. Now, in terms of this happened a long time ago, and so in telling these stories, he can make it both true and not true that he killed someone. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, right? And he might not even know, right? So anyway, this is why I keep writing true war stories. So this would be summing the whole thing up without any of the true capital T true war story details. He was a short, slender young man of about 20. I was afraid of him, afraid of something, and as he passed me on the trail, I threw a grenade that exploded at his feet and killed him. Or now, this is the whole story of what happened, right? We don't have any of the details of the guy that he's inventing. These are the details that he's inventing about himself and how he was feeling during that time, because he probably likely doesn't remember all the things he was feeling during that time. On bottom of 132, in a way, it seemed he was part of the morning fog or my own imagination, but there was also some reality of what happened in my stomach. I'd already pulled the pin on the grenade. I'd come up to a crouch. It was entirely automatic. I did not hate the young man. I did not see him as the enemy. I did not ponder issues of morality or politics or military duty. I crouched and kept my head low. I tried to swallow whatever was rising in my stomach, which tasted like lemonade, something fruity and sour. I was terrified. There were no thoughts about killing. The grenade was to make him go away, just evaporate, and I leaned back and felt my mind go empty and then fill it up again. It was not a matter of live or die. There was no real peril. Almost certainly the young man would have just passed by, and it will always be that way. He's carrying it with him for the rest of his life, right? Now, later, I remember Kiowa tried to tell me that the man would have died anyway. He told me it was a good kill, that I was a soldier, and this is war, and I should shape up and stop staring and ask myself what the dead man would have done if things were reversed. None of it mattered. The words seemed too far and complicated. All I could do was gape at the fact of the young man's body. Now, this is a long ways down the road from it. Looking back, again, trying to remember 20 years ago is difficult. Even now, I haven't finished sorting it out. Sometimes I forgive myself, other times I don't. In the ordinary hours of my life, I try not to dwell on it. But now and then, when I'm reading a newspaper or sitting alone in the room, I'll look up and see the young man coming out of the morning fog. These are the things that he carries, right? And has to keep replaying these things. And this is the PTSD that Ty was going through. Anyway, then we go to Good Form, which is on page 179, and we have the continuation of this story. It's time to be blunt. I'm 43 years old, sorry, true, and I'm a writer now. And a long time ago, I walked from Quang Ngai province as a foot soldier. Almost everything else is invented. But it's not a game, it's a form, right here, now. As I invent myself, I'm thinking of all the things I want to tell you about why the book is written the way it is. As I invent myself. This is a wonderfully cool, weird way to look at this, but especially the older you get. If you try to remember what it was like to be 5 or 6 right now, you probably remember some things of it, right? And the people who would know you as 5 or 6-year-old, maybe parents or guardians or people who are around you, as those people get older, right, or leave your life, there won't be anyone to remember 5 or 6-year-old you except you, right? And if you want to keep 5 or 6-year-old you alive, you're going to have to keep remembering them and telling stories about them. Or as you go to college, for me, 20-year-old Nick, who was a junior in college, that was a long time ago. And I got friends who remember 20-year-old Nick, right? But those friends are also 20 years down the road. And so, even in this process of remembering things that happen in our lives, we are inventing ourselves because we are adding these details and we're kind of doing this kind of capital T true war story to our whole life, which I think is really cool, right? And the older you get, the further you get away from the beginning of your life, the more you're going to have to do that. Um, it's not a game, it's a form. And right now, here now, as I invent myself the way he used to be as a soldier and the way he is now, I'm thinking of all the things I want to tell you about why the book is written the way it is. For instance, I want to tell you this. 20 years ago, I watched a man die on the trail near the village of Maikee. I did not kill him, but I was present, you see, and my presence was guilt enough. Now, maybe the capital T true war version is he killed the guy with the grenade. Maybe what actually happened is he was just by someone who did it, right? And just being associated with it and being next to him, he felt that level of guilt. But listen, even that story's made up. I want you to feel what I felt. I want you to feel why story truth is truer than sometimes than happening truth. Happening truth is the factually occurring truth, right? This is what happened. These soldiers went to this spot. There was a battle here, and soldiers went to these various places, right? It's like a history book. Story truth is the soldier who was going on to be who wanted to study mathematics and was going to get married and had a lot of characteristics who were similar to Tim O'Brien. Okay, so story truth. Here's the happening truth. This is what factually occurred. I was once a soldier. There were many bodies, real bodies with real faces, but I was young then and too afraid to look, and now, 20 years later, I'm left with faceless responsibility and faceless grief. Now, that's something difficult to deal with. If he can pin it down, and even adding these details to help himself remember this and understand it. Here's the story truth. He was a slim, dead, almost dainty young man of about 20 in the center of a red clay trail near the village of Maikee. His jaw was in his throat, one eye was shut, and the other was a star-shaped hole. I killed him. What stories can do, I guess, is make things present. You can take things that happened to you in the past and look at them again. I can look at things that I never looked at. I can attach faces to grief and love and pity and God. I can be brave. I can make myself feel again. Daddy, did you tell me the truth? Kathleen can say. Did you ever kill anybody? And I can honestly say, of course not. Or I can honestly say yes. Right? And I think that's wonderful because it's possible both are true. I mean, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Right? Or maybe if it wasn't that grenade being tossed, maybe it was in the middle of a big battle. And like Tayo said, maybe I killed someone and didn't know it. Right? But dealing with that kind of faceless grief and all the difficult feelings from a long time ago doesn't get him anywhere. Right? And so this proactive method of telling these stories is his method of dealing with the difficult things that have happened to him. So thank you for your attention.